You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Can Trump trust the UK's 7th Prime Minister in 10 years? Based on an article by The Conversation. Brexit didn't just break Britain. It made it governable by drift. The decision was Brexit. Andy Burnham's first foreign call as Prime Minister went to Donald Trump, and the two reportedly discussed opening up North Sea oil. That is the context. The real story is not a novelty phone call. It is the political wreckage Britain is still living inside, a post-Brexit state with churn at the top, weaker institutions, and no stable strategy for what kind of country it wants to be. The source tries to frame this as a problem of leadership instability. That is too soft. Instability is not weather. It is the accumulated result of political decisions, especially Brexit, and the repeated failure of Britain's leadership class to absorb the consequences. The people who sold the rupture are the people who own the damage. Power moved up, then evaporated. The article makes clear who actually holds power: the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the party leadership, and the institutional networks that should have provided continuity. But those same institutions have been hollowed out by turnover. Burnham is the 6th Prime Minister since 2016. Miliband is the 9th Foreign Secretary over the same period. That is not normal democratic variation. It is state dysfunction with a ceremonial coat of paint. The pattern matters because foreign policy cannot be coherent when the people making it are constantly replaced. A government can only project a consistent line abroad if it can hold one at home. Britain cannot. It is trying to perform strategic seriousness while its politics keep resetting the room. Brexit was not an event. It was a wound. The source does something useful when it names Brexit as the structural force eroding prime ministers, the economy, and the country's political alignment. Keep that. The exit from the EU did not just create trade friction. It stripped Britain of the internal market that softened shocks, weakened its role as a bridge between America and Europe, and left the country more exposed to Trump's attacks on the rules-based trading order. That is the larger political pattern. Nationalist fantasy produces dependency, not sovereignty. Brexit was sold as liberation. What it delivered was a more fragile economy, a more polarized electorate, and a state with less room to maneuver. The result is a country that talks like an independent power while bargaining from a weakened position. Trump prefers personal rule. The article is also right to point out that Trump's diplomacy is intensely personal and hostile to bureaucracy. That matters because bureaucracy is where institutional memory, continuity, and allied trust usually live. Trump does not want that. He wants loyalty, leverage, and spectacle. He likes deals that flatter him and systems he can intimidate. So when Burnham reaches for the special relationship, he is not entering a stable alliance between equal institutional partners. He is stepping into a relationship increasingly defined by Trump's whims, Britain's weakness, and mutual contempt among voters. The source notes Trump's unpopularity in the UK and falling British approval of the US. Those are not side facts. They are evidence that the bond is surviving as administration, not as consent. The article softens responsibility. The framing of deep structural forces is accurate as far as it goes, but it still blurs accountability. Structures do not design themselves. Brexit was not an accident. The revolving door at Downing Street was not inevitable. The failure to produce a post-Brexit doctrine was a choice, repeated by successive leaders who preferred balancing acts to a real strategy. That is where the article is weakest. It treats the outcome as a problem to be managed rather than a political disaster inflicted by identifiable actors. Britain's leadership did not merely fail to steer through turbulence. It helped create the turbulence, then normalized it as the new environment. The real lesson: the special relationship is being exposed as what it often is, not a partnership of values, but a dependency arrangement shaped by unequal power and elite habit. Britain is more dependent on the US because Brexit narrowed its options. Trump is more useful to British leaders when they need a patron than when they need a principled ally. Both sides are operating inside damaged political systems that reward improvisation and punish strategy. The broader lesson is simple. When a ruling class blows up its own institutional capacity, it does not produce freedom. It produces vulnerability, volatility, and stronger men with fewer constraints. Britain's post-Brexit politics are not a cautionary tale about mood swings. They are a case study in how nationalist self-harm weakens democratic agency and hands more room to authoritarian personalities abroad. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Sam, thanks for listening.